Thank you. My name's Rusty Kelly, and I belong to the Joy Al-Anon family group in Denver, Colorado. We meet on Tuesday night on Capitol Hill, and you're all invited, and no matter what they tell you, Capitol Hill is, too, a safe neighborhood. I'm glad to be here. I'm having a very good time. You've all been so easy and open and friendly, and it's been lovely to be here. I want to thank whatever committee invited me here. I want to thank Jack and Kippy for letting me be a guest in their house and introducing me to some very cute other things that are guests in their house. And for the beautiful ride up here in my lovely room. It's all been nice, lovely even. I'm glad to be here. I really am. I've been glad to be in every Al-Anon meeting I have ever been to, except the first one. You remember the first one? Yeah, I came in the 60s. An amazing number of people in Al-Anon these days don't even remember the 60s, but in case you only saw American Graffiti or some other movies about the 60s, of course, and you think of it as the time of relatively benign drugs and lots of easy sex and girls with long, dirty hair, there was the other side to that. There were the very respectable ladies who it wouldn't have been any fun to be a hippie if nobody was shocked. And there was the ladies who were shocked at hippies. They had a hairdo that was called a beehive. It was piled on top of their heads, and then it was lacquered and fastened down with all kinds of metal pieces. I don't know how. I guess they weren't security in airports, because they never could have gotten through with those bobby pins. And then it was shellacked. And it was there on top of their head, absolutely indestructible hair. And I walked into my first Al-Anon meeting to a room in a house. We met at home in those days, and at least in Denver we did. And looked at that room full of ladies with their indestructible hair, and I did not feel that I had come home. I came to that room almost financially broke, certainly spiritually bankrupt, but I didn't come empty-handed. I came dragging all my prejudices, all my baggage from many years before I ever got there. And those ladies in that room with their hair and their knitting needles that the sun, they looked like they were going to stab me with all the sun glitting off all that metal. Those women in that room that I had prejudged on the basis of their hair and found wanting gave me something when I walked in that room that I had never received anywhere else before in my life. They gave me absolute and unconditional love. And I was not lovely, and I was not lovable. But they didn't care. They just loved me. Now, I grew up knowing that I was loved because I grew up in New England. New England is not a place. It's a state of mind and a set of rules. And if you don't happen to live in that six-state area, don't worry about it. You just pack up the rules with the best dishes and other things that cannot be broken, and you take them with you and take them out in your new home and live by them as you always have. At least that's what we did. So I knew I was loved because my family did their duty, and it was the duty of parents to love their children. So I knew that I was loved at a basic level. And I also knew that if I wanted any more than that, any more than what duty required, then I would have to do things. I would have to earn any additional love that I got. I would have to have my room clean. In my family, grades were of supreme importance. I would have to be an A student. There were many things that I would have to do in order to be loved. I make that sound like it was a bad place. It certainly was not Walton's Mountain, but it wasn't the Manson family either. there were good things about it, and I grew up in that household at least with a minimum sense of security. And I knew one of the things is that the rules, as Max said this morning, the rules changed all the time at his house. At our house, there were an awful lot of them, but they never changed. So at least we knew what they were, and we could walk the path, or we could at least avoid getting caught when we were off the path. I understood what my place was in that house and how I should fulfill it, and I tried to look as if I did. Some of the rules were that you always look good. It doesn't matter what's going on, you look good. That is a big, important rule, to always to the outside to look good, to never tell secrets. Now, we didn't have secrets about bodies buried in the backyard or anything like that, but we had secrets. We had things that were not spoken of outside of that house. They were not bad things. It was just that they were nobody's business. And we were never indebted to anyone. In our house, we had things like emergency Christmas presents. You know, that was something that you got last year maybe and you didn't really care for a lot. But you put it away in a drawer, and if somebody brought you a Christmas present and you didn't have something for them, you immediately wrapped it up in some of the Christmas paper that you'd saved from last year, because it's a sin to waste anything, too. And you gave it to them so you would not be beholden to those people, that you would not be indebted to them. We went to church. All kids in America, I guess, get to hear about God, and I went to church and I heard about God, and I have to tell you I was not impressed. I mean, they kept him in a little box on a shelf in church. They let him out when we came on Sunday morning, and I thought he ought to be grateful, but he wasn't. He was cranky. He was always angry about something. It was not man's inhumanity to man that made him angry. It was pecky little stuff. I mean, you know, women without hats on, not eating the right foods on the right days, all kinds of little picky stuff that made him angry. And in addition to being just cranky, he was incompetent. When I was very young, I learned to live on my allowance. My father got paid on the 1st and the 15th. I got paid on the 2nd and the 16th, and if anything happened between those dates, that was just too bad. That would teach me to be more careful with my money. But God was always running out of money. They always had to take up a special collection for him because he was out of money. He was just generally cranky and incompetent. And so I did what children do in the presence of cranky people that they don't like much. I stayed out of his way as much as possible, and when I was around anybody who might tell on me, I just acted real sweet about him. I grew up in that household, knowing the rules, knowing what to do. I got married at 17. Nothing that I can ever tell you will date me more than to tell you that I got married at 17 because I thought I was pregnant. I thought you got pregnant by kissing with your mouths open. I know, it totally dates me, doesn't it? If they'd had daytime TV when I was a kid like they have now, it had saved me a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, I was left a widow in 6 weeks behind an airplane crash. And I don't even remember that clearly. I tried to four-step it, look at it. But, you know, it seems to me that what I did was I felt really bad, I think. But I did grieving the way I saw Katharine Hepburn and Greer Garson do grieving. I cried effectively, and I looked really sad, but I wasn't. I really wanted to be alive. I wanted to get on with life. I wanted to do things and go places and be young. And besides that, I finished high school and got to move away from home and go to college. I'd always known what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a man. I don't mean that I wanted to go to Trinidad and come back and tell you that my name is really Russell. But if I called from a girlfriend's house and said, can I stay for supper? My mother always said, your father likes everyone at home for dinner. Even when I was grown and had children of my own, if she thought I wasn't doing things right with them, she would preface her remarks by saying, your father thinks. And that's what I wanted to be, the ultimate authority. I wanted to have that kind of power. When I got by myself in the city going to college, I found out that men don't really have ultimate power, and I found out that I could make them sit up and beg in the back of taxi cabs. I enjoyed that kind of power a lot. But I met this man. You know, we were very careful that we stayed around people like us. That's what we went to church for. That's where we met people like us, that were from whom we would eventually pick spouses. And I met this man. He had the most beautiful brown eyes I ever saw, and he was not people like us. Absolutely. There were people in his family that not only saw little animals that were invisible to me, they occasionally found it necessary to take a shot at one of them. Pop had been to prison. I never met anybody in my whole life who'd been to prison. I didn't know what alcoholics were. We knew there were people who drank, but we were very restrained. Everyone in my family drank. No one abused alcohol, as far as I know, in my whole life. And alcohol was a means to an end. It was not an end in itself. We knew that there were people who drank, but we felt about them the way we felt about Democrats. You know, we knew there were a lot of them, but we never expected to entertain any in our own homes. And so I didn't know what I was looking at. I thought it was colorful. And I decided, my mother had always said that, my dad said, I could be anything I wanted to be. I could be president of General Motors. I could be anything. But my mother, in sort of an offstage chorus of all the women in my society in my generation that sort of had a little verse that they put in your subconscious that said, yes, but it won't count unless you're a wife and mother, unless you have children. And somewhere in my subconscious that record played, and something inside of me knew that something was missing, and so I figured that's what it was, that I needed to be a wife and a mother. And so I was interviewing people for the position of Rusty's husband, and I chose colorfulness and brown eyes. He was not people like us, and I married him and immediately started a campaign to make him into people like us. Of course, what else would I have done? But he also filled another need. He was a very quiet man. He withdrew. If you had to listen, my sponsor once told me I had a 400-pound mouth, and if you had to listen to my 400-pound mouth, you would decide that you would rather go to bed and let me deal with the children, and we did have children. I don't know if you're going to believe this or not, but I went to the delivery room 5 times in 6 years, and they gave me the wrong child every time. I was looking for the little kid like on Hallmark cards, and the kid that would give me fulfillment, and they kept holding up these scrawny little kids that didn't look like Hallmark cards, and they looked a lot more like responsibility than fulfillment. However, I had, at one point, 3 children under a year old and 6 children under 8 shortly thereafter. You know that you have to do more than one at a time if you're going to make that. My mother, a founding mother of Planned Parenthood, was murmuring several things about litters under her breath, and she did not think my behavior was at all amusing. And I don't know how you would have handled it if that had happened to you, but you know, I didn't have a whole lot of time to ask myself deep philosophical questions about whether or not I was happy. I was mostly somewhere between the stove and the washing machine most of the time, and life just moved on without my being able to pay attention to it. And I was afraid. But I was afraid of the children. I knew that they were all boys, such a big bunch of boys were bound to grow up and all go to the reform school. And I was the only person who could prevent that from happening. When the twins were born, the doctor in the delivery room said, "These kids are blank pages. It's up to you what you'll write on them." And I could see that I was not going to enjoy the short story that was appearing before my very eyes. And I didn't know how to stop it. I believed that love was discipline, and my children were well disciplined. I had kids that went to bed without television up to and including their wedding night, and whose allowances were suspended waiting a decision from Social Security. I believed that they needed to be disciplined, and I worked at that very hard because they had also told me that when you're a mother, you'll know. Remember that one? And I was a mother and I didn't know. And I was terrified, and I thought that was an inadequacy in me, and so I did just what I've always done. I bluffed it. I pretended I knew, and I held a tight rein on those little kids so they wouldn't all get away from me and all go to jail. In fact, when the youngest became 21, the oldest one said to me, "Congratulations, Mom, you kept them all out of the reform school till they were old enough for prison." We did a kind of geographic change. See, our families sort of interfered too much in our lives and gave us too much advice, and things would be much better if we could just be further away from our families. So my husband was getting out of the service with medical discharge. He had a bad knee that made him fall down a lot, and so they were giving him a medical discharge, and we bought a little newspaper in a small town in New Mexico and decided to live life anew. A little newspaper in northeastern New Mexico is not the royal road to riches. But at least it let us relocate, and then we didn't know what was wrong, because now there was no family to point out to us that what we were doing wrong or to interfere with our plans. And so we were extremely chaotic, and nobody knew what the trouble was. Certainly I didn't. And the twins became teenagers. On their 13th birthday, I gave them an interesting birthday gift. On their birthday, I gave them their first and only little sister. On their 13th birthday, and they gave me a gift on their 13th birthday too, they began to drink. Now, maybe you don't think that's a gift, but in my family, in my situation, that was a gift, because we finally had something that we could point to and that we knew what was wrong. There was a designated sicko, and I wasn't it. It was a great relief to me. And besides, it happens that I know how to cure alcoholism. And so it was only going to be a brief problem until I got it under control. I grew up, as I told you, in a family where everybody drank and nobody abused alcohol. I have been too young to drink coffee. I've never been too young to drink alcohol. Babies' nipples were soaked in brandy if they were teething, and it helped them go to sleep, which indeed it does. It's hard to wake them up, but it does help them go to sleep. I had been drunk exactly twice in my life. When I was a teenager, they had woodsies, which is a beer bust in the forest. And I used to take all my friends, we'd all go together, and I would take them all home, and they would tell me in the morning what a good time they had, and it didn't look like that to me, but I thought maybe there was something magic about beer, and I needed to try it to see what that would do. So I did just what they did. I got drunk, I threw up, I fell down, I wet my pants, they drove me home, and in the morning they told me I had a good time, and I said, what good does it do to have a good time if you can't remember it? So I just never did it again. So I understood that I knew, I did it one more time because my husband drank scotch, and I thought maybe the key to finding the magic was to drink something you like, and I don't like beer. Never did. So I tried it with scotch, and the same thing happened, and I didn't like it, and it seemed to me like it was just dumb to do that. So I understood that the twins only needed education to understand how to drink properly, like we did in my family. So I set out to teach them how to enhance the flavor of food by drinking it with the right wines. I taught them that white wine went with fish, and they drank white wine with fish and without. And I told them that you do not ever drink more than one drink an hour, and unless the party is very late, not more than 3 in any night. I think they tried that because I said if the end of your nose begins to feel numb, it's time to stop drinking. And they said that worked pretty good for them, except they were always laying on it before they remembered it. My next idea was that I would buy them very expensive liquor, and they were only high school kids. They're only 14, and I would teach them how to drink properly and to appreciate the taste of exquisite liquors. So I bought the very best French Courvoisier, and I bought the proper kinds of glasses to hold it in, and I explained that you hold the glass like this to keep it warm to the temperature of your hand, but not more warm than that, and that you wave it under your nose and inhale the bouquet before you start drinking it, and that then you let it trickle slowly down your throat so you will appreciate the taste of that. I don't know. If there's anybody at your house, you're new to this program, and you have somebody at your house that's appreciating the bouquet and letting it trickle slowly down a throat, I don't know what's wrong at your house, but it's not alcoholism. They used to call me at work and say, we've been practicing, Mom, but we haven't got the trickle down the throat part, and we're all out of booze. Could you get some more? Well, the business, which had been circling the drain, finally went down, and we found some high-minded hippie that thought it was going to be a wonderful crusade to run a small-town newspaper, and we stuck him with it as quickly as we could and got out of there. We came up to Denver, and then I had a really good idea. You know, if you're 14 and 15 and you're drinking a lot, it's hard on your grades. So my next idea was, I said, listen, you will either bring home passing report cards or your enlistment papers. I'm not supporting a bunch of big-boned kids to lay out on my couch and drink. You have 2 choices here. Well, at that time, the Navy had something called the kiddie cruise that you could go in at 16 and get out at 18, I think, and in the meantime get your high school diploma. And so I very shortly had a couple kiddies cruising in the South Pacific. They knew which things to choose, you know. They weren't staying home with me. They had a shot at it in the Navy and no chance with me. One of them actually completed his enlistment and tried to re-enlist, but his commanding officer wouldn't let him sign up again. On the other one, I got a notice from his commanding officer that said essentially that they were sending Bernie home because he was too drunk to be a drunken sailor. And I was totally terrified. Too drunk to be a drunken sailor has got to be pretty drunk. And I didn't know what to do. I couldn't understand how this had happened to me when I had tried so hard and I disciplined so thoroughly and I kept the rules so closely and so well and I kept their little noses to the grindstone as long as possible. I didn't understand how this had happened to me and I didn't know what to do about it, and I was totally terrified because here came the worst of my nightmares. There was a little ad in the back of a weekly newspaper that was just local for that part of Denver, and it said, "Is there a problem of alcoholism in your life? If so, call this number." So I called and I said, "There is a problem of alcoholism. He will be home on Tuesday." The man who answered that phone said his name, and then he said, "My name is Tom and I'm an alcoholic." And I thought, oh, this is going to be really bad, because this man is telling secrets. Surely no sane person would ever say out loud to a total stranger, "I'm an alcoholic." It's just unthinkable to do that. But I talked to him. He said, "Did Bernie ask you to call?" And I said, "Oh no, he's a very wily little drunk. You can't just walk right up and grab him. We have to have a plot to get him." And he said AA doesn't do that. And we had a little discussion about what AA ought to do. I mean, I've got a government-certified drunk coming home, and AA doesn't want it. And I explained to him what I'd read a magazine article that said a newly sober alcoholic was like a new baby. It couldn't be left alone for a minute. And I explained that I worked 3 to 11 and my husband worked regular shift 8 to 5, and we only needed somebody from AA to watch him for a few hours while we got some sleep. And he said that AA didn't do that, and we discussed that a little bit. And he said, "Perhaps you're sick." To me. I mean, I said, "Excuse me? I am the person here who holds this whole thing together. I have the only steady job here. I come home, I pay the bills. I'm the person with the extra $100 stuffed in the toe of a shoe someplace, so when they threaten to foreclose or shut off or repossess, I can save us. I save us all the time. I am the strong, healthy, good person here." But I thought back over the conversation, and it seemed a little strange in places, so I understood that he thought I was the alcoholic. And he said he would have his wife call me, and that made sense to me because I figured he thinks I'm the alcoholic, and he doesn't want to come out as a man and frisk me for the bottle, so he's going to send his wife. And I could see what this was going. We lived in a nice neighborhood. I could see what this was going to be when they drove up in the big white station wagon with the red letters on the side, you know, so AA Search and Rescue. But I'd broken a rule. I'd broken a really big rule. I had talked about things that were none of his business outside the family with a stranger. I had talked about these things, and I had taken up his time, which is as valuable as money, and we must not impose on other people's time. And so I had to let his wife call, and she did, and I talked to her. Now I talk to everybody. I say, "How about them Broncos? And you think it's going to rain?" But that's not what this was about. I talked to her I didn't understand it because it was just fracturing all the rules. But I talked to her, and I said I was alone, and I said I was afraid, and I said I didn't know what to do, and I said I didn't think there was any God, and I didn't have any help coming, and the miserable people at AA weren't going to help me either. And I talked to her. I think she put the phone down and went off and came back every once in a while and said, uh-huh. But then again, I was absolutely beholden to this woman. I had taken up her time, and I had told her the secrets. So she had something on me. So she knew the secrets, and I was indebted to her, so I had to do what she said to pay off my debt. And she said I should go to a meeting, and I figured she probably got a silver teapot or whatever they give you for bringing in the most people to a meeting. And I got to the meeting with the ladies who loved me and whose hair I disapproved of. Bernie came home from the service. He was really lucky. I was off work at that time. I'd gone to some open AA meetings before he came home at the suggestion of this person, and I heard about sponsorship, and I picked out 5 men and invited them to my house. So I didn't want to be pushy. And there were 5, and he could pick a sponsor somewhere out of those 5. And I got to take him to meetings and give him the elbow in the ribs when they said things that were of particularly applied to him and were of particular importance. And I got to explain to him in the car going home all the nuances of that meeting that he may have missed because he's just a dumb little alcoholic. But you know, Bernie wanted sobriety so much that anything disgraceful. And they gave me the steps. I thought they were wonderful. I could hardly wait to come back and tell them at Al-Anon how wonderful those steps were and ask how I could get Bernie to do them. And they said that I would have to do them myself. I didn't understand that, but I took them home and I looked them over, read them again, and decided they were probably right, and I would do the steps, well, the ones that applied to me. I thought that I would start with step 4. I would write the story of my life, and I would take it to someone. See, all the rest of the steps I figured I could do by myself at home, and I wouldn't have to go to all those meetings. But 4 and 5 you have to do with somebody, right? So I was going to do those and get them out of the way, and then I was going home and do the rest all by myself and never come back. So I wrote my autobiography, and I thought I would take it to this temporary sponsor, and she would read it and tell me where I had made the mistakes, and I would never make those mistakes again, and everything would come out fine. So I wrote it. I wish I could have brought it to you. It was an absolutely perfect 4-step. It was corrected for punctuation, indentation, capitalization, all those things. It was double-spaced. It had nice margins. It absolutely looked perfect, and I called her up, and you know, she implied a lie to me. She said to come on over to her house. Now, doesn't that imply that she's going to hear the 5th step and correct it? So I went to her house, and you know, she didn't even read that 4th step that I'd written. She didn't even look at it. She said, "How did you get to 4?" And I said, "I started there." She said, "They numbered them for people like you that can't tell where to begin." I said, "Excuse me, I have a double bachelor's and a master's, and you did not even finish high school, and I don't have to take any nonsense from you." And she agreed with me. She said that was absolutely right. And then she said, "And thank you for coming to my home and sharing with me the joy and peace that permeate your life." So I got to start over again at 1, working with a sponsor and going to meetings. And I didn't get, I worked 3 to 11. I couldn't go to all those meetings. I had other things to do, and she'd show up at my house and drag me out to daytime meetings, and I'd call her and talk to her. She'd call me and she'd say, "What are you doing?" and stop it. But I really did try to work the steps. I had a little trouble with the second step, and after we'd been on it for a month or two, she had a suggestion for me. She said, make a list of the things that are more powerful than you are, that are the most powerful on earth. So I did, and I wrote a little paragraph with each one. I said tide and time and wind, because mankind doesn't control any of those at this point. And this time I had made some progress because she looked at it. She said, "I'm relieved to see that your name is not on this list." But I stayed with it. I don't know why I stayed with it, except that that's the only way I could be alive to talk to you today and to come to your lovely conference and have a good time. I stayed with it. At every meeting that I went to, at the end of that meeting, somebody wrote that there is no sorrow too great to be lessened, and that was very important for me to hear. I didn't think so then, but it became very important in my life. I've told you that I had a little girl for the twins' 13th birthday, and when she was very special in my life, she has always been very special. She's a very beautiful and very talented little girl. When she was 12, she was writing choreography that was being produced by symphonies and by professional ballet. She was very special to me in many ways. When she was about 16, I got a call at work one night, and she said that she was in the jail in the town that we lived in at that time, and that she had preferred charges of rape and incest against her father. I did what you have taught me to do in Al-Anon. I went to her first, of course, and I stayed with her until we were released from there, and then I called my sponsor. Sponsors are wonderful. They never say, take 2 aspirin and call back in the morning. My sponsor said, can you drive the car? And I'm New England. I'm very proud of how well I act in crisis. Of course I could drive the car. And I drove the car, and we went to her house, and they did what sponsors do. They hugged her and loved her and put her to bed and told her she was a worthwhile person. And they treated her beautifully. And then they came in the kitchen, and I would tell you how angry I was at that time. And I don't tell you because I want to hold it back from you. I don't tell you because the English language is not adequate to tell you how angry I was. My sponsor had a little bandy rooster of an AA husband, that you have them here, I know you do. They're about 5, 6, or 7 on the outside, and they're like 9 feet 15 on the inside. And they have not heard that they're not supposed to do anything with Al-Anon. I guess maybe he heard it, but he didn't care. And so he did what AAs do. If you're dying, if you're drowning in the middle of a thunderstorm in the biggest lake, the AAs will come with their little pickup trucks flopping, the fenders flopping, and they'll jump in a boat and they'll row out to you and they'll stick an oar in the water, and then they'll read you the 5th chapter before they pull you in. Well, that's what he did. Not so much the 5th chapter, but a piece of literature that's in there that says if you have a resentment, you must pray for somebody, or you won't get rid of the resentment and it will destroy you. And I tried to do always what sponsors say, and I tried to do that, and the very best I could do was to say, God damn him. And I have never said a prayer that I meant more sincerely. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. But they have these steps in there, and I had this sponsor who thought steps were really important, and they've got these 2 called 6 and 7 that sort of get skimmed over a lot. And we worked with 6 and 7. We worked very hard because I was not willing to give up that anger. I had to look, and I was not entirely willing. The anger made me feel important. It made me feel righteous. It made me feel good. I was not willing to give up that anger, and we had to go back and work the 6th step, and I had to ask for the willingness to be willing. And finally, I was able to ask for him every good thing that I would ask for myself, which is a relationship with his family and a relationship with a higher power. I divorced him, of course. There are some aspects of the disease that are too virulent to take home to the children. You just can't keep that in the house. We'd been divorced about 2 years, 3 years, when lung cancer that had been dormant for a long time became very active, and it was apparent that he was going to die. And I was able to take him when he wanted to go, and the airlines would not let him fly because he was too ill. But they would let him fly with a nurse, which I happened to be, so I got to take him to our sons in California at his request and bring him back. And in 4 days after I brought him back, we buried him, and he did indeed have a relationship with a higher power and with his children. And although I had planned that I would do a very fine New England funeral service, I would look very sad, and inside I'd be dancing and clapping my hands. And I was not. I was sad and sorry that this man had died, and I knew that I could never love him the way a man deserves to be loved by a wife, but that I could love him as a child of God and someone who is suffering from many severe aspects of his disease. I was not able to do that because I'm a good person. I never have even wanted to be a good person. I don't mean I wanted to be a bad person, but I never wanted to be a good person and a saint among you sinners. But I came here and you taught me that I was a sick person, that I could get well, and I did the things that you told me to do, and I was well enough to do that, not because I'm good, but because you are, and because you helped me, and because you helped me to understand that I could be well, and wellness was an option, which I didn't know when I came in. I only came here because for an hour it didn't hurt. And you started me to wellness. My ex-husband had been dead less than 2 years when my youngest son, clean and sober, put a gun against his head and blew it off. I again cannot tell you how angry I was. I was angry with God. And I did what you have always taught me to do. I called my sponsor, and we worked together. I had a new sponsor, and I had chosen this one. It was not assigned to me. I choose sponsors because they have something I want, and she had something I wanted. It was a concept of a higher power. I didn't know that was not transferable. I thought that I would talk to her and she could give it to me. And that was not possible, but I did talk to her, and she helped me work on a concept of a higher power that would work for me and that I could find for myself. Michael had been dead less than 2 years, almost to the month, 2 years, when I had a second son who put a rope around his neck and jumped to his death. I was in the Midwest visiting my sister when that occurred, and I went home, and the second thing I did was put down my suitcase. The first thing I did was call my sponsor. And I said to her, when this is all over, you and I are going to visit about the third step, because I'm just sick of turning my will and my life over to the care of God and having him take my children. And she said what sponsors say, because sponsors live this program, and so God can use their mouth when he needs to get a message. She said, God doesn't take your children, he receives your children. And that made all the difference that I can imagine to me. It allowed me to live through that long and terrible time, and not only to live through it, but to begin to understand it. Now, I know we're here to celebrate recovery, and this doesn't sound like a celebration of recovery, but that's not true. It is. I have 2 sons who have a serious, life-threatening, terminal illness, and have had years, long periods of remission from that disease because of this program and the recovery that you taught both of them. I have 2 sons who have God's gift of serenity in the only way that they were willing to receive it. I have a daughter who works a program very hard, makes great progress, has a relationship with God, and I had to go back and look past my anger and see what my part in that had been. And I have to tell you, I did have a part in that, and I certainly would not have seen that without sponsorship and the help of all of you people who live this program. And I saw that without excusing anybody else's action, I'd made excuses for myself, and I'd left a little girl alone in a household where I wouldn't stay. I went to work and left her there. And I had to understand that let go and let God does not mean that I can abdicate any responsibility that I don't care to fulfill. That God had set up a mechanism for defending her. It was called Rusty, and I had not done that, and I had an amends to make. Risa, my daughter, and I are friends now. That was her idea of what I should do to make it right, was that we would be friends. That's a wonderful, great gift. And watching her work a program and watching her raise her child are wonderful gifts that are mine in recovery, and that I appreciate. But those are her stories and their story. My story is mine. I have to tell you, this is a contented person that you are looking at here. This is a person who is very happy with what her life is. I bought a new car. Nobody in my family ever bought a new car. I mean, not women. We don't know how to buy cars. Men know how to do that. I bought a car and it goes. It's a real fun car. So I got so excited that I bought a condo. And it's a real fine condo, and I bought it all by myself. And I'm paying for it all by myself. And that's fine. And I had a job that I'd loved it for 26 years. I worked there. I loved it for 20 years. I worked there for 26. And I had great quarrels with God about that job because I was working and I didn't like it and I didn't think I was supposed to. And I understood it was because I wasn't trusting enough about money. So I decided I'd go in business for myself. While I was working at that job, I had an opportunity to tour the Indian reservations, 5 of them, with a group of Russian doctors and nurses. And I saw the conditions on Indian reservations, and I was very upset, and I got mad with God and yelled at him, which is what I always do. And he said, "What do you expect me to do? I only have people." So I said, "Oh, yeah. I guess if I want something done here, I should probably do it." And we were able to start a group that started Al-Anon on several of the reservations, started some Al-Anon at several of the reservations. I'm very happy with that work. And I decided that I would go in business for myself, and I decided what I would do. I would help and edit for people writing master's and doctoral thesis. And I set out business cards and said I would do that. So what happened is that right now I have contracts with 6 Indian reservations to write some material that will be used at grade school level to teach children about diabetes and alcoholism and fetal alcohol syndrome and TB and drug abuse, which are the major killers on reservations. I didn't do that because I'm just real smart. I did that because God has allowed me to do that, and it has given me a great satisfaction and great joy. I'm not here to tell you how to run this program or how to do steps, because I don't know. You have to do them however you can do them. I always think that I should bring you something important, and I sometimes wonder if I've done that. But I would like to bring you a prayer that I always close with. It's not conference approved, so you can shoot me if you want. The prayer is attributed to Dag Hammarskjöld, and it's this: for everything that has been, thank you. To everything that can be, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rusty, for your wonderful story. I'd like to give you this in a small token of our appreciation for coming and sharing your story with us today. Thank you.
See how far I've come from New England? I'm carrying the paper. Guys from Washington wrapped I'm a box. Feel valuable in that way.
Okay, can we close in the usual way? Huh? Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. It works if you work it.
Oh.